Welcome back to my channel. The afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains of the kitchen window, casting delicate patterns on the worn wooden table. Sarah stood at the counter, unpacking groceries with methodical precision. The rhythmic rustle of paper bags and the faint hum of the refrigerator were the only sounds in the otherwise silent house. She glanced at the clock. 3:47 p.m. Mark wouldn't be home for hours, and Ethan was likely still on campus. The emptiness of the house felt heavier than usual, pressing against her chest like a weight she couldn't quite shake. Sarah sighed, her fingers brushing against a bruised apple as she placed it in the fruit bowl. She paused, staring at the bowl as if it held answers to questions she hadn't yet formed. The bowl had been a wedding gift, a relic from a time when her life had felt full of promise. Now it seemed to mock her, its cheerful yellow glaze at odds with the dull ache in her heart. The sound of the front door opening startled her. She turned, her pulse quickening, and called out, "Ethan? Is that you?" "Yeah, it's me," came the reply, his voice flat and distant. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. At 19, he was the spitting image of his father, tall, with the same sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes. But where Mark's gaze had once been warm and inviting, Ethan's was guarded, as though he were constantly bracing himself for a confrontation. "How was class?" Sarah asked, forcing a smile. "Fine," he muttered, avoiding her eyes as he headed for the stairs. "Ethan, wait," she said, her voice softening. "I haven't seen you all week. Can we talk for a minute?" He hesitated, his hand gripping the banister. "I've got a lot of homework, Mom. Maybe later." Before she could respond, he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Sarah stared after him, a pang of loneliness tightening in her chest. When had her son become a stranger? She turned back to the groceries, her movements slower now, more deliberate. As she reached for a carton of eggs, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen, a text from Mark. Asterisk, working late again. Don't wait up, asterisk. The message was curt, devoid of any warmth or apology. Sarah clenched her jaw, her fingers tightening around the phone. How many nights had it been this week? 3, 4. She couldn't remember. All she knew was that the distance between them was growing, a chasm she no longer had the energy to bridge. She set the phone down and reached for the eggs, but her hand trembled, and the carton slipped from her grasp. The sound of cracking shells filled the kitchen, and she stared at the mess, her vision blurring with unshed tears. "Damn it," she whispered, sinking to her knees. She grabbed a dish towel and began cleaning up the broken eggs, her movements frantic. The sticky yolk clung to her fingers, a visceral reminder of the fragility she felt. As she wiped the floor, her mind wandered to the past, to the early days of her marriage, when Mark's laughter had filled the house and Ethan's giggles had been a constant soundtrack. Where had it all gone? When had the laughter faded, replaced by silence and secrets? A noise from upstairs pulled her from her thoughts. She froze, listening. It was faint but unmistakable, the low murmur of Ethan's voice, followed by a soft laugh. He was on the phone, his tone intimate, almost conspiratorial. Sarah's stomach churned. She hadn't heard him laugh like that in months. Who was he talking to? And why did it feel like he was hiding something? She stood, her legs unsteady, and crept toward the stairs. The sound of Ethan's voice grew clearer as she climbed, each step amplifying her unease. "She can't find out," he was saying, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not yet." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She pressed a hand to her chest, her heart pounding. What couldn't she find out? And why was Ethan so desperate to keep it from her? The floor creaked beneath her weight, and Ethan's voice abruptly stopped. She heard the faint click of his door closing, followed by silence. Sarah stood frozen on the stairs, her mind racing. The calm she had clung to for so long was unraveling, thread by thread, and she had the sinking feeling that nothing would ever be the same. She descended the stairs slowly, her legs heavy, and returned to the kitchen. The broken eggs were gone, the floor clean, but the mess in her heart remained. She glanced at the clock again. 4:12 p.m. The hours stretched ahead of her, empty and uncertain. As she leaned against the counter, her gaze fell on the fruit bowl once more. The bruised apple sat at the top, its imperfection glaringly obvious. She reached for it, her fingers brushing against the soft, damaged flesh. "Not yet," she whispered, echoing Ethan's words. But deep down, she knew the truth was coming, whether she was ready or not. The house was cloaked in darkness when Sarah woke, her heart pounding as though she'd been running in her sleep. She lay still, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the nightstand. Mark's side of the bed was empty, the sheets cold and untouched. She glanced at the clock, 2:14 a.m. She sat up, running a hand through her disheveled hair. Sleep had been elusive, her mind replaying Ethan's whispered words on an endless loop. Asterisk, she can't find out. Not yet. Asterisk, the memory sent a shiver down her spine, and she reached for her robe, wrapping it tightly around herself. The floorboards creaked as she made her way to the hallway, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. She paused outside Ethan's door, her hand hovering over the knob. For a moment, she considered opening it, confronting him, demanding answers. But something held her back, a fear of what she might discover, or perhaps a fear of losing him completely. Instead, she continued down the stairs, her bare feet silent on the carpeted steps. The kitchen was bathed in the pale glow of the moon, its light casting long shadows across the room. She filled a glass with water and leaned against the counter, her gaze drifting to the fruit bowl. The bruised apple was still there, a silent reminder of the fragility she felt. A noise from the living room made her freeze. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable, the soft rustle of fabric, followed by a muffled voice. Her pulse quickened as she set the glass down and crept toward the sound. The living room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn tight. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she saw them, Ethan and Lila, seated close together on the couch. Lila's head was resting on Ethan's shoulder, her dark hair spilling over his arm. Ethan's hand was tangled in hers, their fingers interlaced as though they'd done this 1,000 times before. Sarah's stomach churned, a wave of nausea washing over her. She stepped back, her foot catching on the edge of the rug. The sound was enough to make Ethan look up, his eyes widening in shock. "Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lila straightened, her expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. She was younger than Sarah had imagined, her features delicate but sharp, her eyes a piercing green that seemed to see straight through her. "Sarah," Lila said, her voice calm, almost too calm. "I didn't expect to see you here." Sarah's hands trembled as she clenched them into fists. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice shaking with barely contained anger. Ethan stood, his face pale. "Mom, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" Sarah shot back, her voice rising. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're having an affair with your father's assistant." Lila's lips curved into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. "It's not an affair," she said smoothly. "Ethan and I are just close." Sarah's chest tightened, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She turned to Ethan, her eyes pleading. "Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you're not involved with her." Ethan hesitated, his gaze flickering to Lila before returning to Sarah. "It's complicated," he said finally. "Complicated," Sarah repeated, her voice breaking. "Ethan, she's your father's assistant. Do you have any idea what this could do to our family?" Lila stood, her movements graceful and deliberate. "Sarah, I understand this is a shock, but you need to hear us out. There's more to this than you realize." Sarah shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear anything from you." Ethan stepped forward, his expression desperate. "Mom, please. Just listen to us." "No," Sarah said, her voice firm. "I've heard enough." She turned and fled the room, her vision blurred by tears. The stairs seemed to stretch endlessly before her, each step a struggle. She reached the bedroom and slammed the door behind her, leaning against it as sobs racked her body. The room was suffocating, the walls closing in around her. She stumbled to the bed, collapsing onto the mattress as the weight of the night's revelations crushed her. Ethan's voice echoed in her mind, his words a cruel reminder of the betrayal she felt. It's complicated. But to Sarah, it wasn't complicated at all. It was a betrayal, plain and simple, a betrayal that threatened to tear her family apart. As she lay there, her tears soaking the pillow, she made a silent vow. She would get to the bottom of this, no matter the cost. She would uncover the truth, even if it destroyed her in the process. The clock on the nightstand ticked on, its sound a relentless reminder of the time slipping away. Sarah closed her eyes, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. Morning light seeped through the cracks in the curtains, casting a pale glow over the room. Sarah sat at the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She hadn't slept, her mind a whirlwind of questions and accusations. The image of Ethan and Lila on the couch haunted her, their closeness a betrayal she couldn't unsee. She stood, her legs stiff and unsteady, and crossed to the window. Pulling back the curtains, she squinted against the sunlight. The world outside seemed unchanged. Birds chirped, cars passed by, and the neighbor's dog barked in the distance. But inside, everything felt fractured, as though the foundation of her life had been cracked beyond repair. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Mom!" Ethan's voice was tentative, almost apologetic. Sarah didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The knock came again, louder this time. "Mom, can we talk?" She turned, her heart heavy, and opened the door. Ethan stood there, his face pale and drawn. He looked like he hadn't slept either, his eyes shadowed and bloodshot. "What do you want, Ethan?" she asked, her voice cold. He flinched at her tone but didn't back down. "I need to explain. Please just give me a chance." Sarah hesitated, her anger warring with her love for him. Finally she stepped aside, allowing him to enter. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped tightly together. "I know how this looks," he began, his voice trembling. "But it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" Sarah demanded, crossing her arms over her chest. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're having an affair with your father's assistant." Ethan shook his head, his expression desperate. "It's not like that. Lila and we're not together." "Not really." Sarah raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched into every line of her face. "Then what are you?" Ethan hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "Dad asked me to keep an eye on her. He thought she was stealing company secrets, and he wanted me to get close to her to find out what she was up to." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "And you agreed to that?" Ethan nodded, his face flushed with shame. "I didn't want to, but Dad said it was important. He said it could save the company." Sarah sank into the chair by the window, her mind reeling. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the picture they formed was far from comforting. "So you've been pretending to be involved with her?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded again, his eyes pleading. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I was just trying to help Dad." Sarah stared at him, her heart aching with a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that her son wasn't the betrayer she'd feared, and sorrow that he'd been drawn into Mark's web of deceit. "Does Lila know?" she asked finally. Ethan shook his head. "No. She thinks it's real." Sarah closed her eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. The weight of the situation was almost too much to bear. "Mom," Ethan said softly, "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you." Sarah opened her eyes and looked at him, her heart breaking at the pain in his voice. "I know, Ethan. But this is a mess. And I don't know how to fix it." Ethan reached for her hand, his grip tight. "We'll figure it out together. I promise." Sarah nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed him. The road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, and she had no idea where it would lead. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. "Sarah!" Mark's voice was muffled but unmistakable. Sarah's stomach churned at the sound of his voice. She stood, her legs trembling, and opened the door. Mark stood there, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said, his voice firm. Sarah nodded, stepping aside to let him in. The room felt smaller with all three of them there, the tension palpable. Mark glanced at Ethan, his eyes narrowing. "I see you've been busy." Ethan flinched but didn't respond. Sarah crossed her arms over her chest, her gaze steady. "What do you want, Mark?" Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know about Lila," he said finally. "And I know what you've been doing, Ethan." Ethan's face paled, but he didn't speak. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. "What are you going to do?" Mark's expression hardened. "What I should have done a long time ago." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Sarah's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. But one thing was clear: the unraveling had only just begun.